Sidebar.
which yeah, I can get into if we're ready, if everyone's ready.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, so last week I broke down Peter Thiel's prophecy of this Antichrist, who he believes is a political figure, kind of like a Greta Thunberg, who preaches stagnation and will exploit climate alarmism to stand in the way of human progress. And this week, I want to explore a bit about how Thiel's fear isn't just some fringe belief, it's become a guiding ideology for Project 2025, which is this rising political movement spearheaded by the Heritage Foundation, and it has the explicit goal of institutionalizing Trumpism. And on page 674 of their blueprint, their plan, is this proposal to defund the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration as well as the National Weather Service, because both of these agencies are seen as pillars of this climate alarm industry. And these ideas aren't just theoretical, they've already been put into practice through Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, which has hollowed out key public agencies such as the ones essential for climate preparedness. And that brings us to the unfortunate and tragic and catastrophic flooding that happened this past weekend along the Guadalupe River in Texas, where, I'm no expert, but I don't think any amount of funding could have completely prevented this disaster, but dismantling the systems that help mitigate its impact and soften its impact made it far worse. When the floodwaters rose overnight, communities were left scrambling because many of them were in their warning coordination meteorologist, the person who's responsible for overseeing emergency communication, had taken an early retirement several months before, which was a direct result of the Doge's mission to shrink the administrative state. And some mainstream outlets are starting to connect the dots. The Texas Tribune and the New York Times are asking real questions, tough questions about the communication breakdowns and the staffing cuts and whether this tragedy could have unfolded differently. For instance, Mike Baker, who's reporting for the Times, details how this wasn't a sudden failure. It was a product of years of deinvestment.
Mm.
In Kerr County, where the floods hit the hardest, and a bunch of hit a very vulnerable youth camps. These youth camps were using a word of mouth system, where the upstream camps would call downstream camps to warn of whenever the flood waters or the river would rise into precarious levels. And state officials have known for a bit that this wasn't enough. In 2016, they asked the Texas Flood Infrastructure Fund for help. This is all according to Mike Baker in his reporting. The state offered to cover just about 5% of an engineering study, but the local leaders ended up backing out because it was all too expensive in their mind. And, on the other hand, that same year, Texas lawmakers passed $51 billion in tax cuts. Then, about a year later, in 2017, local officials in Texas asked FEMA, the Federal Emergency Emergency Management Agency, for $1 million to build a basic flood alert system for the area, and they were denied because the federal government was still focused on Hurricane Harvey recovery, which had devastated areas near Houston. And anyway, all this to say is that this is manufactured austerity. Like, the government pleads poverty when it comes to flood warnings, but it has no problem materializing $1.5 billion for new IDF bases, or financing endless regime change wars across the globe, or
Mm.
most recently, militarizing a park in Los Angeles. And even USAID, as controversial as it may be, it did deliver life-saving medicine to babies in Sudan, and now the mothers of these babies are watching them die because that funding vanished due to the Doge cuts. And so
Yeah.
this isn't just mismanagement, it's a deliberate reallocation of care away from the public and toward the powerful. And it's what happens when government is run by billionaires and it's for billionaires. And what makes it even more bleak, I'm reminded of Peter Thiel, is that and Elon is that these billionaires driving these decisions are not planning to stick around. They are dreaming of Martian colonies or uploading consciousness or just fortified transhuman futures. So it's not that the floods were ignored because of a hatred of science, it's that the future being built by policy and investment and design doesn't really depend on what happens down here on Earth. At least not to those who are, yeah, making these decisions. And so our public systems are being dismantled, and the billionaires like Thiel or Musk or Zuckerberg or Sam Altman or they're being treated as visionaries and kind of shielded by a media and political culture that um, is yeah hesitates at the very best to name class power directly. And then there's someone like the New York City mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani who challenges that power and who dares to say, literally, I don't think we should have billionaires. And the backlash is immediate. Trump's AI and crypto czar, David Sachs, he tweeted that Mamdani represents the defeat of liberalism. His warning is to get on board with MAGA or end up on Mamdani's dinner menu. And so, who's the real threat here? These billionaires cutting corners at the cost of human life, or a guy asking why halal food is more expensive? Somehow, it's Mamdani who gets the critique. The very same newspaper that's asking important questions about the flood in Texas, the New York Times, they're running they just ran a hit piece that dredged up Mamdani's college application from over a decade ago to Columbia that paints him as dishonest and radical and racially suspect because of what he checked as his race on his application.
Mm.
And it's not for anything he did as a state assemblyman, but it's literally for questioning the legitimacy of billionaire wealth. And so that's the media reflex. When the billionaire directed austerity comes at the cost of real lives, they're capable of asking these hard questions and connecting the dots. They've done it in Texas. But when someone challenges the billionaire class directly and they propose policies that might actually improve the material conditions for the working class, the same institutions turn defensive. And so I think that that's the pattern that's really important to recognize. That the press is willing to name the effects of a broken system, but the moment someone asks who benefits from that system and who funds it and who shields it, that person is branded as dangerous.
Mm.
So I'm really learning that media literacy is not just about spotting fake news. It's about understanding how the stories are made and who gets to tell them and what power they serve. Which really reminds me of your the algorithms and influencer lesson of your media literacy moment today, Sydney.
Sure. Yeah. And I really love what you said about like the reallocation of services or reallocation of like money from billionaires from the public to billionaires. It really makes me think of that. Have you ever seen that movie, The Gift? It's kind of like a horror.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good one. Kate Blanchett. Yeah.
Yeah, but it reminds me of this idea of like, essentially in the movie, like somebody gets a gift of like a huge wealth of money. And in like the money, if you accept it, you accept the gift of money, you then somebody you don't know dies. And that's like the trade-off essentially. And everyone like keeps accepting the
Mm.
money. And it's so interesting to me because it does at the end, like there is like this catastrophic event that ends up impacting that family that accepted the money to begin with. And so I do feel like there is this sense of like the butterfly effect of like these people are still being affected, but because it's not directly affecting, because tax cuts are a direct effect or like tax benefits are a direct impact. We see them, they're very tangible to us. It's kind of like the same way I was reading or listening to a podcast the same way talking about wealth and how we are very easily, when dating, for example, to see or recognize somebody as wealthy and so they're valuable. But it's because that's like a tangible thing that we can see and that we can count essentially. But when it comes to how many people have lost their lives in the Texas flooding, it's more difficult to trace back and say exactly that is the thing that caused this, or misallocation of funds or this person getting fired, you kind of have to go backwards and do a lot more work that people either don't want to do or they don't see as tangible. And so I do think that's so important when it comes to your points about like reallocation is that we're still being impacted. I just don't think in the ways people recognize or that are as explicit as we're seeing.
Yeah, yeah, and it's subtle in the ways like just yeah, like I mean you with the floods like you don't you wouldn't like all the investment or the de-investment when it's happening, it doesn't register and it's only registers when there is a catastrophe and you're yeah, and it's you know it's so it's not easy to prove whether the investments would are profitable or whatnot. I mean they're probably not. You probably yeah you have to spend a lot of money on things that aren't gonna generate some kind of economic benefit immediately. But yeah, when you have a whole town that's wiped out, the recovery, I mean it just takes forever for people to get back on their feet. And yeah, it's kind of that slow the big picture, the slow game that is yeah, it's not as in this sort of cha-ching, very quick, where's the instant kind of gratification or instant evidence of what's working, what's not working. It doesn't fit into that line. And yeah, we're all affected by I mean, yeah, a flood doesn't discriminate against economic well-being. I mean, there are a whole yeah, just a wide range of people affected.
Absolutely.
And yeah, and like I'm curious about where I mean there is a disconnect in our media where it's, in our political culture very much aligned with the wealthiest of the wealthiest, but this poor man's propaganda that's in the materialists. And I mean, there's been some far more severe stories of literally, CEOs being murdered. But I mean, Mamdani, his rise to the Democratic nomination in New York City, there's this a real kind of maybe the zeitgeist is changing a little bit. Where I mean, even I think the Democratic base is really fed up with the sort of corporatist alignment of the Democratic Party, and so yeah, this. Um, yeah, it's the tides are shifting a bit, but it's yeah, the power and the influence of media is very hard to kind of dislodge a bit. So happy to be doing this work and feel like I'm learning
Yeah.
a lot even just showing up for this podcast. So
Oh, yeah, me too, dude. Okay, I think that's it for
yeah,
this week's Disinfo Detox. Thanks for writing us out while Nolan's out. Bye.
bye.
Oh, Roy.
Hey, Detoxers! You've been listening to the Disinfo Detox. If you value smart takes and sharper media literacy, support us at patreon.com/disinfodetox. No cash? No sweat. Just like, comment, follow, and share. Even a one-word reaction boosts the signal. Thank you for supporting the Disinfo Detox, where media literacy meets breaking news.